Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and possibly good morning, as I think we've got some North Americans kindly joining us. I hope you're all doing well. We're about to start, but first I'd like to do some housekeeping. We've already done a pre-check, but if everyone can still hear me, wave your hands. Yay, yay, I get hands waved. This is cool. Um, great. So let's dive in. Over the next 45 minutes or so, you'll hear about the world of ADHD, otherwise known as attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and neurodiversity. There's a bit of time for questions, but my goal today is that you come away feeling more knowledgeable about these terms, why they matter, and so that you can better support yourself or your friends and perhaps family members, actually, regardless of whether they have a neurodivergency or not. So I'm looking there, so I'm going to put the camera there. So that's you all on the right-hand side of my screen. So now I'm looking at you. This is good. Right. So let's dive in. Um, Also worth noting, you won't come out of this presentation being able to diagnose ADHD. I'm going to cover some symptoms, but there are very good reasons why the diagnosis is in the domain of skilled medical professionals. This isn't a slide-heavy presentation, not after the first 30 or so. And at the end, I'll share a link so you can download the slides straight away. And there's a bonus slide linking to some research backing up the points that I've made. If during my presentation there's anything significant that doesn't make sense, please do unmute yourself and let me know straight away, as I won't be looking at the chat whilst I'm talking. Otherwise, I ask that you keep your questions until the end for reasons of time and also to help ensure that I cover the main points. What you can't see is that I'm actually reading from my notes. This is part of my ADHD. I have a poor working memory, but as you'll see, it just makes me who I am, successful by doing things differently. Okay, so hopefully that's covered all the housekeeping. Um, Before I dig in, this is the agenda. You'll hear about red stars, 2 episodes of my life, a bit of science, and hopefully some considerations that you can put into practice. I've done this presentation before with some friends. Today I'm going solo. But what I'd also want you to know is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Gender, life experience, and current environment all play a hand. And now I ought to say, my name's Paul Ginsberg. I grew up in North London. Oh, hold on. There we go. My name's Paul Ginsberg. I grew up in North London, but now I live in Glasgow. 4 years ago, I discovered I had ADHD. It had just taken me 40 plus years. I'm also dyspraxic and autistic, amongst other things, and I'll explain those terms as we go along. I'm also an ADHD coach, but prior to that, I used to work in the technology space for a significant chunk of my life. I will explain what an ADHD coach is later on, but only really briefly. This talk is about sharing knowledge, hopefully in a fun way. Because ADHD and neurodivergency awareness is a passion of mine. So it's not particularly a sales pitch, basically. Um, right. To check that you're all still there, although I see people smiling and looking at the screens, which is really great. I want to do a little exercise. It's not going to tell you whether you are neurodivergent, but hopefully will provide you with some insight about how the brain works. Okay, so if you're comfortable doing so, and it's going to take less than 2 minutes, if you're comfortable doing so, can I ask that you close your eyes? Okay, thanks to everyone that wants to do that. And still, with your eyes closed, imagine a five-pointed red star on a black background. Okay, great. With those eyes still closed, just think about that five-pointed red star on a black background. I want you to really focus on it. Okay, that's it. You can open your eyes. So thank you for doing that. Now, if you open your eyes, you will see that there's 6 stars being shown on your screen. One is for no visualization, 3 to 6, which is a very bright, clear star. Which one most closely matches what you saw? Okay, so I'm about to launch an anonymous survey. And please select the number which corresponds best with what you saw. Again, that's 1 for no visualization, 3 to 6 for full visualization. And survey coming now. So hopefully you can now see that on your screens. Cool. Give it 10 more seconds. Do, 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 do. Got to time it. Okay, perfect. So hopefully everyone's had time. So I'm now going to end that poll, and I'm going to share the results. So hopefully you can see that all on the screen. Right, what do I want to say about this? At this point, you may be thinking, this is a simple thing to visualize. Surely everyone is thinking the same. How many variations can there be? Well, here's the results. There's how many people? 6 people participated in the poll, and we go from 1 through to 6 with actually nothing at 3 and 4. Now, typically, it's a bell shape across the whole population when this study is done on mass populations. There's a bell-shaped curve distribution with an uptick at 3 and 4. So, and that didn't happen this time. But as I say, it's not about neurodivergency necessarily. It's the lack of visualization is called aphantasia. It's some people do that and some people don't. Cool. Okay. So hopefully you're now seeing. Cool. So hopefully you're now seeing my slide again with the 1 to 6. Please let me thumb up if you're seeing the 1 to 6 stars on screen. Great. Perfect. So what this shows is that whilst we look fairly similar on the outside, people's internal experiences vary considerably. It also highlights that we all think differently. This is neurodiversity, but not necessarily neurodivergency. We're going to come back to these definitions later. For what it's worth, I'm at number 6. Okay, so I've said we're all diverse, but within families, there are similarities for good reason. Likewise, ADHD is strongly genetic. This means that if one of your parents has it, there's a good likelihood that you may have it too. It's not guaranteed, but it is higher than 50-50. It doesn't mean that someone has to inherit it from their parents, but it is often the case. So, with that said, let's meet the Ginsbergs. Well, we mentioned my childhood, so I needed some evidence. My other sister doesn't like having her photo shown, but she is happy with this talk. I thought my childhood was normal. After all, it's the only one I knew. However, if you go through the lens of the questionnaire that forms a significant part of any ADHD assessment, things start to become clearer. How often have you heard the phrase, "Will you let me finish?" As a family, we competed to ask this question first in my household when I was growing up. To be honest, with quite a lot of frustration and anger attached. But actually, this simple phrase covers 3 different hyperactivity impulsivity aspects: blurting out an answer before a question has been completed, difficulty waiting your turn, interrupting or intruding on others. Amusingly, because I wasn't the only one doing this, it meant that one other criteria didn't get the opportunity to present itself, which is talking excessively. My mother would possibly disagree, mainly because she wanted to finish what she was saying, and in my opinion, that could go on for some time. As an adult, with a bit more self-awareness of how others perceive me, I'm still not great at holding back. You can ask my ex-husband's view if you want to hear some more recent thoughts about whether I am concise and to the point, such as whether I had fully finished my thought process, or whether I get sidetracked and move on to something else as I'm talking. I now manage this better by trying to observe how long other people are talking for, and then trying to speak for a similar amount of time, or writing down what I want to say on my phone, and then waiting for an opportune moment. By writing it down, it gets the thought out of my main system. I've learned to redirect my energy, but it doesn't mean that it's not happening. Cheats like this is why ADHD in adults can be hard to spot. Another hyperactivity symptom is fidgeting, tapping hands or feet, or squirming when seated. I can recall the day when I was playing with the pen and it slipped, managing to scar the top of the inside of my mouth. It isn't quite the same as the definition I've quoted, but that's when a bit of flexibility comes into these things. Just check. There we go. I also rarely sat with all 4 chairs of my school chair all 4 legs of my school chair on the ground. It didn't occur to me that I was doing something unusual and that most other kids were sitting fairly calmly in their chairs. These days, you can now count the number of squidgy toys that I have on my desk. or the number of times my head disappears from a Zoom call as I look on the floor to regather parts of my pen which have mysteriously flung themselves off my desk. A final medical grade symptom is an inability to play or engage with leisure activities quietly. But here's the thing. In the 1980s, when I grew up, I thought that ADHD generally was thought of as kids running around on the top of tables during lessons. Yes, that may have been a correct diagnosis, but they were only the most obvious cases. The diagnostics criteria has changed since then, and it's the modern criteria that I am referring to throughout this talk. We've also come to acknowledge that girls are typically far better at hiding their ADHD due to social peer group pressure, leading to huge issues with underdiagnosis and consequences later in life, even more so than with boys. Back to my hyperactivity, which was mainly internal. The racing around were thoughts in my mind, which never stopped. These thoughts weren't particularly useful, as they were colliding with each other. I didn't have the skills to control them. Sometimes I don't now, but on a good day, when I recognize it's happening, I can redirect them. So, that's the hyperactivity. It's probably a good time to mention that although this journey is about to talk, is it? It is a good time to mention that although this talk is about late diagnosis, the symptoms must appear during childhood, otherwise, as well as adulthood. Otherwise, what looks like ADHD could have a different underlying cause, such as trauma. But ADHD is a combination of two different things. You can have one, the other, or both. The first was hyperactivity impulsivity, and the second is inattentiveness or attention deficit, otherwise known as an inability to focus. I'm going to recite the first three because they are always present for me. Number one, failing to give close attention to detail or making careless mistakes in schoolwork, work, or other activities. Number two, difficulty in maintaining concentration when performing tasks or play activities. And finally, appearing not to listen to what is being said, as if the mind is elsewhere, without any obvious distraction. So I was always annoyed, mentally beating myself up and regarding myself as a failure for all of the above. It's not fun when you've got the knowledge, but for no accountable reason, you put down the wrong answer. Do this many times, perhaps dozens or hundreds of times during a week, and it really starts to have an impact, especially when the school system is all about scoring that perfect A. For me, this meant extra work because it would take longer to get into the zone when trying to focus. That leads to more stress, and this took away from what should have been this took away from when I should have been relaxing and recharging. I'm not sure it helped my school grades either because my mind simply wasn't engaged. What could have led to a better sense of self-worth would have been a move away from a culture where the focus is on correcting minor imperfections. Rather, it would be better to celebrate what has been achieved and lean into that, grow that area, rather than trying to do things which weren't the best use of my time. It is a question of balance. So here's a case study about where to put your efforts. I'm dyspraxic, which is most easily thought of as being clumsy. At school, one kindly PE teacher used to let me run down the track without any hurdles, whilst everyone else was jumping over them. I still always came away last, but at least no ambulance was involved. That kind that bleh, that kind PE teacher helped sow the seeds of forgiveness and self-compassion in me, as well as removing a potential source of huge stress. Put simply, I was never going to be great at doing the hurdles, and this hasn't affected my life. As an adult, I've also reframed some of the argument. I now realize that even if I had scored 100% in whatever activity, the follow-up question would be, why did it take you so long? So, right, back to that inattentive list for just three more items. The next one is getting easily distracted by extraneous stimuli. Should we ignore my rant about PE, artificial and meaningless goals, and move on? Cool. The next one. One of the final two. Losing items necessary for tasks or activities, such as pencils, mobile phones, or wallets. This doesn't happen so much these days, but perhaps there's a reason why I tend to have two of at least everything, including this talk. There's also a copy on a memory stick, just in case I misplace or delete it. A lot of my childhood was spent looking for things, though perhaps not as much as my dad, who would be forever calling out, "Where did I put my keys?" Did I mention that ADHD is strongly genetic? I was very typical in comparison. And who likes homework? So, that final symptom, reluctance, dislike, or avoidance of tasks that require sustained mental effort. I think I know many people that suffer from that. I do as well, but it took years to actually recognize it. It's not an avoidance of all tasks, but it's not avoidance of all tasks because hyperactivity can do wonders for concentration, but it can be an interesting mix. As I say, there are things you can do about this, but I'm just going through the symptoms. Okay, we're now going to have a break, partly just to rest my voice, but hopefully you'll find this video fun. Some people may also get a sense of deja vu. It lasts about 2 minutes. So, oh, no, not that one. There we go, there's the play button. Hopefully everyone's getting down.
Yeah, my wife, she sometimes rages that I'm not so organized. She knows that it has been ages since I bought that bag of fries. Just look at the pile of dishes, the old tissues on that stool. You may think that I am hopeless, but my brain is pretty cool. ADHD, ADHD. I may be a slob, but I'm great at my job. That is just me. Call it a deficiency, but you know what? I do not agree. This could be our real superpower, ADHD. Just think of the human brain as a gigantic mixing board. Normal brains can use these dimmers to ease in and out of chores. A little of this and that, and like that all the chores are gone. My brain doesn't work like that, man. My brain just goes off and on. ADHD, ADHD. Destigmatize it, no one should hide it. Take it from me. It's not a deficiency that's wrong. ADHD, help me write this song. We're good creators, stop being haters. ADHD, ADHD. Yeah, I'm awful with money, but hey, I'm funny, seriously. I might forget some things today, but please believe me now when I say you can get through it. Here's how you do it, ADHD.
Cool. Right. Okay, I hope everyone enjoyed that. There is a second verse available online. Right, let's delve into some science, which is still a rapidly developing area. This is part of the reason why there are more people than ever before who are being diagnosed with ADHD, because we know more. There are marked differences between neurotypical and neurodivergent brains, which is important because sometimes people say everyone is a little bit autistic or ADHD, and this isn't the case. Some brains are formed differently from typical brains in terms of structure, function, and development, and that's what we call divergence. It means there are significant and pervasive differences from the majority of the population. Some of the parts of a divergent brain are larger, whilst others are smaller, and the connections and the way they communicate are different too. Even the wiring and rate of growth is atypical. It also means that neurodivergency cannot be changed, any more than I can permanently change my eye or hair color. It's worth noting that some children find their symptoms get easier as they develop from childhood to adulthood, and may even dip below a clinical threshold. This isn't the case for all of us, though. Right, so neurodivergency can typically include autism, gifted, high IQ, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, and Tourette's. There are other definitions, though. We're now going to focus just on 2 of these. ADHD is really 2 different issues which frequently co-occur: attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. Actually, I hate the word disorder. That comes about because scientists prefer an ordered world. They're quite autistic about it, in fact. As a brief recap, but to explain in slightly different terms, ADHD can make people dreamy or impulsive. There are many additional characteristics, so not the diagnosable symptoms I mentioned earlier, but also things such as time blindness and emotional intensity. It's important to note that these are not guaranteed. Everyone is different. Within any one individual, some traits cancel each other out, some reinforce each other, for better and for worse. So, what is autism? also known as autistic spectrum disorder. Officially, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder marked by restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior and deficits in reciprocal social communication. The spectrum part highlighting that this can show itself in many ways and at different levels of intensity. For instance, when someone suggests something new that I haven't thought of, I often reject the idea. I've now grown so used to this that I advise people to come back and make the same suggestion in 24 hours, by which time my mood or thought process may have distilled the information and I can be far more agreeable. Not always, though. With ADHD and autism, many symptoms also overlap. It's estimated that somewhere around 40% or even higher of those with ADHD also have autism, but this is less well known, which is why I wanted to mention it today. For instance, I have a friend who is autistic, as am I. We're both intense, but I prefer Doctor Who and he prefers archery, and knowing the different types of arrow and how deadly they can be. We also have difficulties keeping track of conversations. My attention slips, but he has language processing difficulties, so it can take him a while to understand what he has heard. We both have the same difficulty, but in this case for different reasons. On the other hand, we do both share a keen sense of social justice and fight against inequalities. Often, someone with one neurodivergent condition has more than one neurodivergent condition. For instance, ADHD with dyslexia or autism with dyspraxia. It's like an online supermarket shop. You've selected one thing, but there's a likelihood that someone has done a swap or even placed a few extra items in the basket that you definitely hadn't selected. For neurotypical people, their pattern of development and skill acquisition is well known. For a neurodivergent person, it's spiky. Some skills and behavior will be gained at a higher than expected level or more quickly, whilst other abilities may be delayed or less developed. I've also included a little bit more information at the end of the slide deck should you wish to learn more. So, I've mentioned neurotypical and neurodivergent. Let's pull back and explain where neurodiversity fits in. Everyone is neurodiverse. I can 100% everyone on the call, you're all neurodiverse. If you're thinking of a Venn diagram, that's the box now on the screen. Within the neurodiverse box, we've got two groups, neurodivergent and neurotypical, which don't overlap, as is shown here. Okay, so with neurodivergent, you've got all the conditions we've been talking about, ADHD, autism, etc. So around 20% of the population have a neurodivergent condition. Some know they have it, and some do not. Many do not. For instance, it used to be thought that women and girls couldn't get ADHD, simply because the studies have been performed by white middle-class men on white middle-class boys, which leads to some serious disparities in research. A study in 2021 found that over the prior 77 years, only 3 studies have been undertaken that centered on Black autistic girls and women. Men are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed, with all the impact that has on everyone's awareness and support. To put this into context, let's say that for every 100 people on a train or an airplane, this possibly means that there are 20 people with at least one neurodivergent condition. Issues such as stigma and accessibility of diagnosis do affect how many people will seek a diagnosis. So, you've heard my childhood story and some of the science, but now I want to give you my adult story of day-to-day life. For a quick reminder, this is a slide about me. You can see that there are significant differences between myself and a neurotypical person. And I really do mean it when I use the word difference. It's a neutral word. It's not a superpower. Can't stress that enough. I'm broadly happy as I am, and I wouldn't give it up, but it's definitely got its pros and cons. Society doesn't quite recognize our needs yet, even though society benefits from our challenge to the status quo. With that in mind, we're going to go to the office. Before becoming an ADHD coach, I used to work in IT. In fact, this example comes from my last gig. My boss walked into the room and said, "We're not reacting to priority maintenance jobs as quickly as we should be. I want an email to go out to all the maintenance managers when a priority job is logged on the database to ensure that it is picked up as quickly as possible." There you go. The background is that working in the maintenance department of a large housing organisation, it's not realistic for managers to be seated at their screens looking at the ticket logging system all the time, jabbing the refresh button. to see what's coming in. With this in mind, the manager's requirement appeared fair on first reflection. Also, that manager was senior, so no one dared question them. In walks our hero, me. As we've discussed, I have certain autistic and ADHD qualities, a keen sense of justice, and a need to understand why I am doing something, rather than just getting on with it. I'm fearless. Literally have no fears due to some impulsive tendencies, which means I'm not afraid to challenge convention. This is both a good and a bad thing, because it means that I will ask the boss for more information, regardless of whether or not the boss is busy, or even likes being questioned. Apparently, some people don't like being challenged on requirements and just want their way followed for speed or ego reasons. That's not my problem. I'm going to ask anyway. So, I asked the boss why this requirement was needed now. It turns out that staff weren't phoning their managers when logging priority jobs, which they should have been doing. I came to understand that these are the sorts of jobs where there is an imminent threat to health and safety. Also, the staff were cheating by mislogging standard jobs as a priority to get them done quicker. Instead, I suggested that we added a rule to the system for priority jobs. This would only allow the jobs to be saved if a member of staff answered yes to both of the following two questions. Is this an imminent threat to health and safety? And has a manager been called? We implemented this, and the quality of the ticket logging was improved. The speed of the response to priority jobs guaranteed, and email spamming to the whole team rather than the single person that needed it was prevented. So, I'm direct and I'm blunt, and I save the organisation time. As with many ADHDers, on various occasions I've been the canary in the coal mine, the first person to highlight problems. Other qualities I have include tenaciousness and hyperfocus. This doesn't mean that it is stress-free for me, but for better or worse, often with an idea, I don't give up until I see it through. One quick word. A couple of times now, I've listed on the slide a few neurobiological differences I have from the majority of the population. I want to stress that I claim and own those labels, but for me, they are just that. They are effectively search engine terms which I use as a quick start to help me find the tools that I am likely to find useful. Nothing more and nothing less, as they still don't define who I am. I also want to highlight that if you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met just one neurodivergent person. It's a bit like whiskey or cookery. Just because the basic ingredients are the same or broadly similar, nutrition related, doesn't mean that things turn out identically or even in the same ballpark sometimes. Okay, right. So you've done exceptionally well and we're almost into the final leg. I just want to break things up a bit because you've been listening to me for long enough. So I've got one more exercise for you, and then I'll cover my experience of being diagnosed and then wrap up. Neurodivergent people, that's those of us who have ADHD, autism, or many things starting with this, don't think like the majority. This gives us different perspectives, insights, and ways of doing things. This can all have benefits for you, whether it's a business or other projects you're working on. Can you now, for 1 minute, which I'm going to time, take a moment just by yourself to think of a time when someone with a different perspective, whether caused by neurodivergency or not, has made a positive contribution to something you are working on. That different perspective could be about work, party, celebration you are stressing over, absolutely anything. So I have a moment of quiet, actually just 30 seconds, while we think about that, and the details are repeated on the slide. So this is just a thinking exercise for everyone, 30 seconds, details on the slide. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Okay, so I'm just bringing us all back together for a moment. So you're in a safe virtual place with quite a few people interested in this topic. So shortly, not yet, I'd love for you to chat. Oh, Yeah, that's fine. I'd love for you to type into the chat box, or perhaps just raise your hand and kind of come off mute, to share that moment of when working or chatting to someone with a different perspective has benefited a project you were working on. Before you do so, I just want to remind you that this session is being recorded. So if you type into the chat box, I'll read out and anonymize the examples. If you raise your hand, then that's less anonymous, which might be fine, but I'm just duty bound to point it out. So I'm going to wait for 30 seconds just to see if anyone's got anything, but like raise your hands and that's absolutely great. And I can see that Muna has raised her hand. So if you want to come off and just tell us about that moment for you.
First disclaimer, as soon as you asked the question, my brain took fright and went a bit blank, even though I know there's loads of examples. And then I remembered I'm always trying to sort my house. I don't know if you see the mess behind me. And someone said to me, Mina, you're always talking about when you get finished or when I'm finished. I don't understand that, because it's a house and there's no finish. And that changed a lot. I still struggle, but that idea, because it was always like putting things off. I got to finish this. You're trying to do it all at once, and then overwhelm, then collapse, then blah, blah. So that really helped me. There's no finish.
That become a coach. That's absolutely beautiful. And that kind of realization and recognition and then embodiment of that realization is just fantastic. And that's a really beautiful example.
Because I don't know if it's comes up in criteria, that all or nothingness that can have.
Can do. Can do. Right, we've got time for like perhaps one or two more reflections if anyone wants to share, but otherwise I'll just move on into getting into the wrap-up territory. Just give it a moment. Cool. Okay, I'm going to move into the wrap-up territory. If anything comes to people's minds, feel free to share on the chat. But just that moment, that different perspective, it avoids groupthink. And groupthinks, I was listening to a podcast the other day, literally that can affect the state of the nation. So they were saying that MI6 made mistakes because the senior management were all agreeing amongst themselves rather than listening to the single voice which said, no, I don't think this information is actually right. So literally can have very significant consequences, groupthink, and that's where I think I add some value. I add value elsewhere, but perhaps not in a security situation. Maybe that'll be to other people. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to move on. But that's great. Thank you very much, everyone, for doing that exercise. So let me share the screen again. Cool. There we go. So yeah, hopefully you found that all exciting. Right. There we go. So this talk is about late diagnosis. Oh, yes. Sorry, go for it.
I just want to say, we can see your notes. I don't know if you want to pop those on a separate screen.
I definitely want to pop those on a separate screen. Excellent. Thank you. At least told you in advance that I was reading from my notes. I think that was Yvonne. Thank you very much. Much love. I love it when a plan comes together. Cool. Okay. I'm going to give myself 10 seconds. Back into it. So this talk is about late diagnosis. Hopefully you can just see one slide which says adult and emotions on your screen. Great. I've explained about my symptoms and how I didn't spot them, what they are, and how they continue into adulthood, along with some pros and cons. What I didn't discuss was the emotional journey. I'm not going to dwell on the decades of depression, which were caused by my neurodivergent brain trying to fit into a neurotypical world. Instead, I want to briefly share with you my journey of adult discovery. During lockdown, I had time to investigate a long-standing sleep problem that I had. It's another common ADHD symptom I now know. At the time, I lived in the Netherlands, and the healthcare provider would cover the cost of some treatment if I had ADHD, but I would have to pay for it myself if I didn't. So off I went, I did the assessment, and here I am. I could speak about the assessment experience, how it is much better in the Netherlands than here in the UK, or about the Dutch nurse who who herself had ADHD and guided me through that medication process and gave me such reassurance, and also demonstrated that it's possible to have ADHD and do a very successful job. But we don't have time for that. Instead, I'm going to highlight that there is a grieving process. In the run up to the diagnosis appointment, there's worry, concern, and excitement, all at the same time. But after the diagnosis, then what? I just want to see. No, still on the same slide. Cool. Fear of the unknown, fear that the drugs offered will change you, and grief for the person you never were. Then simultaneously, relief that you are not mad. And then, once processed, you can get on and build a new stage in your life. So let's very rapidly address a couple of points. 90% of those that seek a diagnosis get confirmation that they have ADHD. There's nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, to say that people are incorrectly seeking one. There's just no evidence. It's just that we now have the knowledge and awareness about this difference. Medication can be strongly beneficial in over 80% of the cases. That means that for 20%, it isn't, but for 80%, it can be beneficial. Its efficacy for ADHD is much better than antidepressants for depression, for example. It doesn't work for everyone, but when the medication is right, it's like adding oil to a bike or to a car. It makes things run more smoothly. It doesn't, and I really want to highlight this, change our personalities. Unfortunately, it rarely makes tedious work fun. The medication is useful, but not that useful. And then there's regret. Well, we tend to land on the point that we are where we are. If not now, when? Better to get a late diagnosis and have awareness than nothing at all. These days, well, I would say it does take time to get to that place, but that's where I think everyone that I've met ends up at. These days, although I am far more comfortable in my skin, I still go to a local peer-led ADHD group on a regular basis. It's a place that ADHDers have time to discuss our concerns, where we currently are in life, and then reflect and support each other. You basically meet like-minded people discussing their ADHD. I find it warm, caring, and friendly, and a very powerful experience. It's also simply fun for me to be around people who think in a similar way. There are ADHD peer-led groups up and down the country, and also in America and other countries are available. And these can be found via Facebook, Eventbrite, and Meetup. There are also sometimes groups for parents and partners of ADHDers, not led by psychiatrists, but led by other people who have lived experience and are happy to share, just as I am doing so today. A charity called ADHD Aware also runs various online groups, and further details will be on the slide at the very end. To use another proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. We don't individually have every answer, but it's amazing how many we do as a collective. So I'll just give you 10 seconds to have a look at the cartoon on the screen. Cool. It's just a really important thing. I find self-blame is quite prevalent with neurodivergent people. So it says, I got nothing done today, but I still feel overwhelmed. And the other dinosaur says, that's okay. Your self-worth isn't based on your productivity. And the first dinosaur says, I guess I keep on forgetting that. And then a narrator says, so do you, reader. Stop doing that. So, who's giving you these messages? And are they correct messages? Right. So, hopefully, you've come away today with a better understanding of not just what it means to be ADHD and or autistic, but actually to live with these conditions. They're part of us, but don't define us. If you think that someone is struggling, regardless of the reason, the very best tip I can give you is simply to bear in mind that everyone is different. So ask them, what help can I give? Would any extra support or accommodations help you? That opens up the conversation. It's definitely not for you to be a doctor and define someone else's medical needs or condition. If you yourself have ADHD, then medication, exercise, and DBT, which is the newer form of cognitive behavioral therapy, all have strongly proven positive impacts. It's well documented that getting an ADHD diagnosis is tedious and there isn't enough capacity on the NHS, but the first point of call is still your GP. get on the waiting list, and you can always make a decision about whether you want the support offered when you're actually at the front of the queue. Excluding DBT, other talking therapies can absolutely be very suitable options, although they tend to deal with the symptoms rather than the root cause of ADHD. At this point, I do want to quickly mention ADHD coaching. It's a relatively new profession, and as such, the evidence is harder to prove. It comes into the personal development sphere rather than therapy, and it's very future focused, so that the client or you come in with a specific practical challenge or challenges that you want to address, and then the coach helps you activate. So then the coach helps you activate and retune the skills you already have. It's very partner or collaborative way of working. As with many talking-based approaches, you need to get on with the practitioner and be in the right mental place for it. Otherwise, it simply won't work. Coaches vary as it's an unregulated profession, but there are certain associations and accreditations to look out for, such as the ICF and the PAAC. I'm on the pathway to becoming a member of both. In fact, I'm a member of one, but still on the pathway for the other. In a slightly parallel vein, I've put some common adjustments on this slide. Remember that there's a link to download these at the end, so I'm just going to rattle through these. It's focused on the world of work, but hopefully you can see that there are parallel actions that can also be made in home life. For instance, with work, sending meeting agendas out in advance, clear and direct communication, offering flexible hours and work locations, making available distraction-free environments and quiet spaces for those that want. It's worth noting that other people can prefer music playing on their headphones. So what works for one doesn't always work for someone else. Accepting stimming, that's fidgeting or repetitive movements, and not always requiring cameras on during meetings. This is called the curb cut effect, where adjustments for one particular minority group help many other people besides. So, one question, who wouldn't benefit from those changes and those shifts? Okay, so perhaps some of this has resonated with you directly today. If you want to know more, particularly about ADHD, then I've listed some organizations and resources on this slide which will help. The United States tends to be a bit further ahead in terms of neurodiversity awareness, but there are still some UK-based resources. The QR code will also lead you to this set of slides. I'm on LinkedIn and Blue Sky, and if you want to connect with me, do add the words "I heard your late diagnosis talk" or something. I get lots of random connection requests, so I do filter them out very slightly. If you need to go, thank you hugely for your time, and I'll send out a short survey a little later today, and I'd love for you to fill it in. It's literally 2 minutes or even less, and because that's a good way for me to learn. But otherwise, I'm going to stay and answer any questions. I've set aside a few minutes. And I'll also share a link to book the time in my calendar. So if you do want a follow-up chat about any of the topics mentioned today, I'm more than happy to do that. So with that in mind, I am now going to stop the recording.